It's a surprising Monday morning, Victory Monday for your New York Giants, and here to help me break it down on the Big Blue View YouTube channel as we discuss the Giants' victory over the Los Angeles Chargers is Big Blue View's Tony DelGenio. Tony, I'm not sure we expected to be talking about a victory today.
Well, after 1 month of the season, the Giants have the same record as the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. So, pretty much what I expected.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Quite a
Okay.
surprise.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It was a good game for the Giants. It was obviously a really good day with one major exception. Um I think obviously let's start with Jaxson Dart. Let's start with what he meant. And I wrote this morning, look, don't put him in the Hall of Fame yet. Um, don't don't make the assumption that he will be for the Giants what Daniel Jones couldn't be as the heir to Eli Manning. But this was a good start. It gave the Giants hope, and I think when you're a struggling franchise that's been going backwards for a long time, hope is what you ask for. Hope is what you look for, and I think that's what you come out of yesterday with.
Yeah, he brought energy to the team and confidence. I mean, which
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily expect for somebody playing his first real NFL game. I think we can discount the few zone reads that he did in the first few games, but his first actual game, right, as
Mm-hmm.
Giants quarterback. So you don't necessarily expect to see that confidence, but that's what he's got. And of course, he's got a lot of experience coming out of college, and but he's also, I think, got a personality that, if he can be successful, will be infectious to his teammates, because he's the type of quarterback you can imagine teammates rallying around and having confidence in. Of course, he's
Mm-hmm.
got to show it on the field, right? But he's got that
Mm-hmm.
personality that gives him the chance, I think, to be the real deal.
Yeah, it was. I think you're 100% right when we talk about confidence. We talk about personality. That's something the Giants haven't had for quite a while. And look, it really didn't come from Eli Manning when Eli Manning was the quarterback, but the confidence came from Manning, but the personality came from some of the people around him. It came from Brandon
Mm-hmm.
Jacobs and some of the other people around him. But certainly the Giants haven't had that personality, that little bit of swagger, for quite a while. And I think for me, in addition to the confidence, I think the impressive thing for me about Jaxson Dart, we knew about the toughness. We knew he would be a gritty player. We knew he would take hits. Um, he played mistake-free football, and I think that was impressive to me. Um, the play I wrote about the play this morning, the 3rd and 5 play at the end of the game, where he made the 13-yard pass to Theo Johnson. And you're impressed, A, by the fact that Brian Daboll put the ball in his hands, and B, when you realize the backstory to the play, which is really an adjustment that Dart and Theo Johnson came up with on their own. And
Mm-hmm.
the ability to do that, the study habits to do that, the maturity to do that, and the confidence to go to Brian Daboll and say, hey, we're going to change this play that you've been running this way for the last 10 years. That we're going to change this play, and I get a kick out of that. I thought that was a really good, indicator of a guy trying to do things the right way.
Yeah, and right. I mean, it all really comes under the banner of leadership, and you want the quarterback of your team to be the leader of the team. It's the most high profile position. It's the position that can orchestrate things more than any other position on the field. And so you want your quarterback to be that type of guy. And yeah, and the Giants, haven't had that in a while. And it looks like they may have it in Dart. Obviously, it's one start. Things can change very quickly in this game, but but for what he faced against a good defense, that's the other thing you have to remember about yesterday, is that he's not doing this against the worst defense in the league. He was doing this against a top 10 defense in the league, and so I thought overall, what he did was very impressive, even though he was far from putting up big numbers. I mean, the numbers weren't impressive at all. But the fact is, he led them on drives. He got he had the offense keep the ball for a while, so the defense wasn't getting too tired. The defense could have gotten tired very easily because they spent the whole game tracking down Justin Herbert all over the place. And God bless them for the number of times they got to him, but or got close to him. But yeah, for someone starting his first game, I had no complaints.
Yeah, you come out of the game with hope. You come out of the game with optimism. You come out of the game thinking this was the right decision by Brian Daboll. And by the way, Jaxson Dart took a lot of hits yesterday. I'm not sure he took a harder hit than the one he took from Brian Daboll at the end of the game with that hug that almost broke Dart in half. I don't know if you see the photo on Big Blue View. It's like Dart's like, oh my God. Oh, I that might have been the hardest hit that Dart took all day. And to be honest, understanding the pressure that Brian Daboll is under, understanding that Daboll absolutely took ownership of the choice to go to Jaxson Dart, understanding that Joe Shane can call drafting Jaxson Dart an organizational decision, but we know from the video that the Giants put out, on draft night or after the draft, that Joe Shane was giving Brian Daboll the quarterback that Brian Daboll wanted. So we know that this is Daboll's guy. So I can't blame Daboll for the big exhale, for the big hug, for the big, for the big post-game reaction. He needed that. The Giants needed that. And so that made it a really good day, just not only for yesterday, but hopefully for the rest of the season and for the future in general.
Yeah, and it's not clear. I mean, I think the Giants have a big challenge in front of them because that offense now is going to be without its major weapon, and so it's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward. And it's entirely possible the offense will bog down for many reasons, not just that. You can't forget Daniel Jones's debut against Tampa Bay in 2019, which was absolutely inspiring. I mean, it was right. I mean, it was remarkable. And then really he didn't have another. He won one more game after that, which wasn't as impressive as the first game. And while he had his moments during the rest of the season, I think the Giants didn't win another game until the next to last game of the year when he had another great game. So initial impressions can change in a hurry when you go to a different opponent, once your opponents start to get some film on you and know what your tendencies are and so on. And so I think you can't expect too much, but it was a good start.
Absolutely. And I think that I read this stat somewhere where the Giants are the first 0-3 team with a rookie quarterback to beat a 3-0 team. And I can't remember if it's ever or if it was, 30 or 40 years ago, but the whole thing is it's really good, really, be excited today. Be excited today, be happy, but don't, like I said, there's a long way to go before we know for certain what Jaxson Dart's going to be and how his tenure as Giants quarterback is going to turn out. Tony, I think we have to talk about Malik Nabers. We have to talk about that. And as you said, that's a really tough blow. And we don't know for certain that it's a torn ACL, but we can be pretty sure that it's a torn ACL. He'll be out for the season. The only thing that you hope at this point is that there's not a lot of other damage, PCL, MCL, that really complicate the recovery. Guys recover pretty well from torn ACLs. It's when the damage is far more extensive than that you worry about how long the recovery is going to take, and how much that injury is going to take away from a player. So I think it's just fingers crossed today that it's an ACL only, and that Nabers will be back as Malik Nabers a year from now.
Yeah, and there are two aspects to it. The first and most important one is you just feel sorry for Malik Nabers himself, because I think he's someone who puts out for this team and does everything he can to help them win, and he's been frustrated about getting the ball, and rightfully so, right? Okay, because there's some good parts of last year he wasn't getting the ball much, and until Drew Lock came in and got the ball to him, and now just when there's the chance that he's got a quarterback who might be good at getting the ball to him, this happens to him, and so from that standpoint, which is really the most important one, you've got to feel for him. And from the Giants' standpoint, naturally, it's very troubling, because he is far and away their number one receiver, and they really don't have anything close after that. They've got some good receivers, nice receivers, but no one who scares the defense that much. And so that's going to be a real challenge to the Giants offense going forward.
Tony, I don't know what happened to the screen here. I don't know what you see, but I see little teeny tiny pictures of Ed and Tony, and I'm not sure why. But
really? Okay, I see. It looks normal on my end.
Oh, that's good. That's good, because I don't know what happened on my side, but we'll just keep plowing ahead here, and the thing about it, let's talk about Nabers a little bit. You look at the way the Giants played offense yesterday, and they were going to be conservative because of Jaxson Dart. They were, because it was his first start. You wanted to play mistake-free football. You wanted to run the ball. You wanted to take shots when they were there. You hoped that the defense would give the offense some advantageous opportunities, and we'll talk about that later. The defense did do that, and we'll talk about that in more depth in a little bit. But you do have to wonder where the big plays are going to come from in the passing game. Darius Slayton is a good player, but we saw in the pre-Malik Nabers days, he's not a number one. He's not a guy that changes the equation, changes the way the defense plays. Wan'Dale Robinson is a complementary wide receiver. Jalen Hyatt is a guy that can run fast, but still hasn't shown that he can actually be a wide receiver in the NFL. And look, the Giants played him for 29 snaps yesterday and didn't throw him a pass. That he's going to have to get some passes thrown his way, but to expect, Jalen Hyatt to be a guy that makes up for the production of Malik Nabers is a lot to ask. I think there's a lot on Brian Daboll and on Mike Kafka to be creative, to be inventive, to reach deep into the playbook, to find some creative things like the shovel pass that they ran, at the goal line. Find some creative ways to get the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson. They're not going to be able to run Jaxson Dart 15 times a game. He's just going to get killed if they do that. So I don't think you're going to see you're not going to see explosive offense from the Giants for the rest of the year, despite the hope and the optimism around Jaxson Dart. we just cross our fingers that long term, when Malik Nabers comes back to the Giants, he's still Malik Nabers.
Yeah, so this is where, and absolutely on that last sentiment, you hope that this is the type of thing that he can come back to and get back to where he was before. And as you say, as long as it's just, and quote unquote just, an ACL tear, if that's what it turns out to be, these days they work miracles with those types of injuries, and players get back to being pretty much what they were before. It's only when you have one of those combination injuries that things can get really messy. So yeah, so you hope for the best for him personally, as well as for the Giants as a team, because they obviously need him. I mean, I think going forward, it's not Brian Daboll's and probably not Mike Kafka's tendency, but I think you got to run a lot of 2-1 personnel and get both Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger into the lineup on a regular basis, so you have more receiving options. And I'll be kind of surprised if they don't start running more 2-1, even though I don't think that's their favored personnel grouping, but you have to ask who's going to catch the ball, and if they can do a good job catching the ball, then you might be able to spring Darius Slayton on deep risk. We know that Darius Slayton is a good receiver, and he's a good deep receiver, right? I mean, when Darius Slayton was on the field with Tyrod Taylor a couple of years ago, and one of the many times when Daniel Jones was hurt, Tyrod Taylor found Darius Slayton downfield on deep shots on a regular basis. And so we know that that's possible. We got to see whether Dart can make that part of his game when need be. If you can do that, then you can still make the offense functional. The problem that I see, is that the Giants are not a great run blocking offensive line, and so they can't just become a ground and pound team the way that the roster is currently constituted. They just don't have that big, huge, road grading offensive linemen to run behind. So I think it's a challenge to Daboll and Kafka to see what they can do to make the offense functional.
Absolutely. It was nice to see Andrew Thomas play a full 76 snaps on Sunday. Wondered if Thomas would still be on a pitch count, and he obviously was not. He played pretty well. I think there's still, with Thomas, there's still rust and there's still room for improvement. But his pass blocking was really solid yesterday, and that does help that offensive line. But it's that interior really where and I think you saw it a couple times in some of the goal to go situations where they tried to run the ball up the middle, they tried to pound it, and it just and it just didn't happen. That is still, I don't care what the Pro Football Focus grades say in the end, that is still an area where the Giants long term are going to have to look for solutions on the inside there. And I don't know at this point. I think we've talked about Marcus Bowe as a possibility inside there. I don't know that that's going to happen this year. You're looking at a guy who is, I think 300, maybe 303 pounds, a guy who people talk about as really needing more play strength, really needing more weight. I know that Jermaine Illuminor is not going to guard. I know that. He's a tackle. He considers himself a tackle. He wants to be a tackle. He's got some limited NFL experience at guard, but there's no proof. There's no real proof of concept that he's actually good at it. So I don't think the answer is moving Jermaine Illuminor in there. The answer might not come until next year, if it even comes then.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of stuck with what they've got. They can always, and I'm sure they will probably sign a wide receiver from somewhere. I mean, you can just bring someone up from the practice squad. But I won't be shocked at all if they try to sign a wide receiver. But I mean, there aren't any Jamar Chases out there
No.
waiting to be
And
signed to a contract. So yeah, you can't I think have too many hopes for that. So they're going to have to change the style of offense they play, and then the question is whether they can do that efficiently at all. And unfortunately, they don't have the type of offensive line that gives you confidence that they can. We'll just have to see. I mean, that's why they're paying Dable the big bucks. So
the one thing to feel good about, Tony, one of the in terms of that is on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, I said before the season started that I thought the formula for the Giants was going to be predicated on their defense. They would be a defense-first football team, relying on their defense to keep the score down, to create some short fields, to create advantageous opportunities, for the offense, and to have the offense, for the most part, take advantage of those opportunities. And I thought yesterday was the first time we really, really saw that. We really saw the formula sort of come to fruition. Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau were fantastic on Sunday, putting pressure on Justin Herbert, coming up with key sacks, coming up with pressures that caused incompletions or grounding penalties at critical times, keeping points off the board. And, Dexter Lawrence made a huge play. I think Dexter probably should get fined for letting himself get tackled by a quarterback. But, but Drew Phillips came up with a big play. Those are the kinds of things I think we were hoping for, we were expecting, from the defense, and that they're going to need to be a competitive team going forward.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that I think the Giants have shown in the last two drafts that, especially I think when you're drafting high, you go for the best player available. Now, last year they needed a quarterback, and they decided to pass on McCarthy and Penix and Nix and draft Nabers, and it's a shame that Nabers will be out now, but I think there's no question that Nabers was a great pick in terms of the quality of football player that he has turned out to be at the NFL level. And so now you come into 2025, they still need a quarterback, and they could have taken one at number 3, right? And instead they go with Abdul Carter. And you could say, well, you've got Brian Burns, you've got Kayvon Thibodeau. What are you going to do with Abdul Carter? Well, Giants showed what they can do with Abdul Carter, and he was just unbelievable yesterday. And they finally had a game where they were able to play him mostly on the edge instead of having to bring him inside to play off-ball linebacker, because of injuries and stuff like that. They finally got to play him mostly on the edge. And the three of them as a combination are, and granted, the LA Chargers are really hurting on the offensive line, and so you were seeing far from the best that they have to offer in terms of pass blocking yesterday. But that combination of three pass rushers was just absolutely devastating yesterday, and really they are the ones that won the game, in my opinion, for the Giants. And you see what Carter can do. I think he was recorded as having 9 pressures by PFF and 8 pressures, I think, by Next Gen Stats. So, I mean, yeah, how much more can you add? And he still hasn't had a sack in the NFL. But for a guy who has 0 sacks after a month of play, he's like one of the most impactful edge rushers in the league.
Absolutely. And this is the way the Giants drew it up. This is what they were hoping for. This is what they were looking for. from that edge group. Combine that with the play that Lawrence made, and that's what they were looking for, from that front seven in general. It's what they're going to have to have. They're going to have that if they're going to be a competitive football team going forward, going through the rest of the season, because it's going to have to be defense first. They're even with a healthy Malik Nabers, with a rookie quarterback who still has some training wheels on. All right, they weren't going to light up the scoreboard anyway. They're going to have to play solid defense to have a chance. They gave up some running plays yesterday, but they gave up a couple running plays. They gave up the long pass to Quentin Johnston, but they held the Chargers to 18 points. And as you said, the Chargers' offensive line is beat up. They lost Joe Alt yesterday. I don't think they had Mekhi back then. They lost Rashawn Slater for the season. But that's what you're supposed to do to a beat-up offensive line. You're supposed to dominate it. You're supposed to hit the quarterback a lot. And the Giants did that. And they filled up the turnover chest a little bit. So that was a good thing. But, Tony, let's talk about where the Giants go from here. They go to New Orleans next week. They'll be favored, maybe for the only time this season, at least the only time so far. But this is a game that now they have to win. They because a lot of the good feelings that they just generated go away if you go down to New Orleans and lose that game to a really weak Saints team that might be the worst team in the league. So you have to go down and you have to go win that game.
Yeah, and when you think that after next week, their next three games are Philadelphia, Denver, and then Philadelphia again. Well,
yeah, it'd be a good idea to win.
There aren't, I don't think getting a win in Denver is out of the question because that team is having its own problems there. But still, I think overall that's a team with a lot of talent on it, and a team with a lot of talent, especially on the defensive side. I have a hard time putting points on the board in Denver, and then the Eagles are just the Eagles, and some days they don't look like they're Super Bowl champions yet. At the end of the day, when you get to 60 minutes, they always seem to come out with a W, and so next week is by far the Giants' chance to get a second win on the board before the schedule once again gets really tough, and they absolutely have to take advantage of that. New Orleans might be the worst team in the league, but actually they gave the Buffalo Bills all they could handle yesterday, and they wound up losing by 12, but they were competitive in that game against Buffalo, and so they're not that terrible a team, but it's a game that, if there's one game on the Giants schedule that you would say they
absolutely. And the one thing that I wanted to mention is the idea that the Giants, for a change on Sunday, made some winning plays. I have to admit, I think it was 13-3, and then it got to then the Chargers score, and I think it's 13-10, and then it looks like they're going to score again in the second half and take the lead, and you're sitting there thinking, oh, it was nice while it lasted. It was nice while it lasted, but now it's going to fall apart. There's no Malik Nabers. Jaxson Dart's hobbling around on a bad hamstring with no real ability to use the quarterback run game. And they made the plays they needed to make to win that football game. And for me, for a young football team, for a team that had an opportunity against Washington that it didn't take advantage of, had an opportunity against Dallas that it didn't take advantage of, had an opportunity against Kansas City that it didn't take advantage of. You have to learn how to win football games. And I thought the Giants offensively and defensively yesterday. And you can throw in a 69-yard punt by Jamie Gillen that got them off the goal line and flip the field. They made the plays that they needed to make to win the football game, and I thought that was a step in growth as well, because you have to learn how to win in the league. You have to learn how to make the play when it needs to get made.
Yeah, what I still feel like I'm not seeing from the Giants that we need to see is the secondary making the big plays. Now Drew Phillips had an interception yesterday, but that was on a ball that was out there that he had just had to dive for and get. And before, and Drew Phillips has been so up and down this season. He has one bad game, one good game, one bad game, and yesterday one good game. The part that I'm not yet seeing from the Giants is their secondary hounding receivers and contesting passes to the receivers of the other team and breaking up passes. And they'll do it once in a while, but I know that when I'm sitting there watching, if I see the opposing quarterback get the ball off, I'm either hoping the pass is inaccurate or that it gets dropped or something like that, because I don't yet have any confidence in the Giants secondary to actually break up a contested pass. And that's what I feel like we need to see if that defense is really going to become a good defense. The pass rush will be there, but the quarterback's going to be able to get the ball out sometimes, and they've got to be able to do a better job on things. I mean, the touchdown to Quentin Johnston, and again, you have to be realistic, but LA has a very good set of receivers. Quentin Johnston was considered to be a bust as a first rounder, and he's finally learned to catch the ball with his hands, and now he's kind of showing out. Ladd McConkey is very good. They mostly neutralized him yesterday, and Keenan Allen, is still an impressive wide receiver. So they've got a good receiving core and a couple of big guys there, but the Giants need to show me personally that they can actually defend passes in the defensive backfield. And I don't feel like I've seen that yesterday. I've been pretty disappointed with Tyler Nubin, who I feel is still not making plays at safety, and I think Javon Holland, the jury's still out on his impact. I think Adebo looks pretty good. And next week will be interesting since he's going back to New Orleans where he knows the players, and so we'll see whether he can be effective there. But that to me is what's keeping the Giants from being a great defense at this point, because they've got what they need up front.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those deals, Tony, where Adebo, for example, was brought in largely, well, first of all, because he's a quality cover corner. He may not be what you would consider, a top 5 in the league shutdown corner, but he's a good corner. But we haven't seen the playmaking impact in terms of interceptions and things like that he showed in New Orleans. I'm not sure the other guys have it. I mean, I think Drew Phillips has 2 interceptions now. Cordell Flotz had his hands on a couple balls. Tay Banks had an interception yesterday that was taken away by a penalty, but Banks doesn't get his hands on the ball often enough. So I just wonder if that particular situation isn't going to change until the Giants get another offseason and get an opportunity to try to add more talent to the secondary. I thought Tyler Nubin played okay yesterday. He made some impact plays around the line of scrimmage, but he did come out of Minnesota with that reputation as a ball hawk, with that reputation as a guy who could create turnovers, and we haven't seen that yet. The Giants said coming out of college that they weren't concerned about Nubin's lack of foot speed. but maybe that's part of what's showing up at the NFL level. Maybe he just can't quite get himself in position to make those plays. I'm not sure, but it would be nice if Tay Banks started to play like a first round pick, and but I don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that will be their undoing against the good passing teams in the league. And well, we'll see. But the pass rush can hide a lot of sins if it's effective, and I think that's kind of what you saw yesterday.
Absolutely. Anything else? You wanted to hit today, Tony?
No, I just want to comment on one thing I saw in the comments here. What's wrong with playing Evan Neal at guard? And the answer is, if you're going to run the ball all the time, actually, that might be a good idea to put Evan Neal in at guard if you feel like you've got to become a run-heavy team. The problem with Evan Neal is that I think he's shown the Giants that even on the inside, he still can't be a pass blocker. And go ahead.
I was going to say the only other thing I would say about Evan Neal is you scratch your head sometimes and you wonder why the Giants, because he's still 25, 26 years old. I think he's 26. You still think it would be better for them long term if Neal would become, an adequate to better than adequate guard, rather than continuing to run 35-year-old Greg Van Roten out there every week. But I think that this is year 4 with Evan Neal. There's a lot of water under the bridge between Neal and the front office with the misdiagnosed injury and things like that. And you wonder if there are things behind the scenes, if there are that have led the Giants to just say, we're just basically done with this guy. And I don't know that for a fact, but you wonder sometimes, because we don't know what the dealings are between the players and the coaching staff and the front office and all of that, behind the scenes, away from the cameras, away from the media. So you just wonder if there's things we don't know about the relationship, between Neal and the Giants. So maybe someday we'll find out, maybe we'll never know, but it looks more and more like Evan Neal's not going to get that opportunity unless injuries force the Giants to give it to him.
Yeah. And so they're going to be stuck with an offensive line that can't dictate to defenses in the running game, and unfortunately that shows up in the red zone, where I see comment from Mark Thompson, red zone play calling is bad, and it is bad. I agree that it's bad. I feel like they've been very uninventive in the red zone. I mean, I think about 2022. Okay, and their offensive line was no bargain in 2022, and their skill players were no bargain in 2022. Yet they managed to get the ball into the end zone. And the thing that will be seared into my memory until I go to my grave is that 2-game stretch where they beat Green Bay in London, beat Aaron Rodgers, and then came home and beat the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson at MetLife in consecutive games. And in those games, they were effective in the red zone. They got touchdowns in the red zone with a bunch of players that you had to look up on your program to find out who they were. And I just don't see that inventiveness in the play calling in the red zone now. But the other thing that you don't see is an offensive line that can open up holes in the run game. And so we saw it again yesterday. They get down there inside the 10 and they've got 4 cracks and they can't get the ball into the end zone because the running game just won't do anything. Dexter Lawrence makes his interception and gets tackled at the 3, and they can't get the ball into the end zone with 1st and goal from the 3-yard line, and have to kick a field goal. And that to me is the really frustrating thing, because this team's going to need to do that type of thing going forward if Nabers is out for the year.
Oh, they are. And, Mark Thompson mentions that they're not opening up the passing options in the red zone. And he says it's like they don't trust the quarterback. And look, I'm not going to go back and discuss the 3 games with Russell Wilson, but the Giants were bound and determined on Sunday. It was really obvious. They were bound and determined not to put Jaxson Dart in bad situations, not to put too much pressure on Jaxson Dart. And I think about the 4th down play. Okay, the 4th down play where he flipped the ball up to Wan'Dale Robinson, and we can say Wan'Dale Robinson should have caught that. Okay, but that ball was a floater. Wan'Dale Robinson was hit on the play. He was hit in the air as he tried to make that catch. But I think of, you have a rookie quarterback making his first NFL start. Okay. That particular play, Jaxson Dart held the ball and he held the ball and he held the ball and he looked at Wan'Dale and he looked at Theo Johnson. And I think the ball was supposed to go to Wan'Dale Robinson right away, although I could be wrong about that. But he held the ball and he held the ball, and then he looked at the other side, and then he ran around and he floated the ball up to Wan'Dale Robinson, and he hoped Wan'Dale could make a play. And so that was one point in the game where I thought Dart was indecisive. So what you don't want is the rookie quarterback to make mistakes in the red zone, throw interceptions, and take away scoring opportunities in that sense. I think the more experienced Jaxson Dart gets, the deeper they'll be able to get into the playbook, the more options they'll come up with. But I do think it's not the idea that they don't trust Jaxson Dart, but they've got to protect him a little bit as he develops too. So, it becomes, you get really close to a touchdown yesterday. Cam Scattaboo, I thought, was going to score a touchdown at one point when he burst to the outside, and the defensive back from the Chargers made a really nice tackle. One-on-one tackle where I thought Scattaboo was going to win that particular matchup, and it just didn't happen. So I think it's a work in progress. I do want to address one comment from Vinny Scam about bringing Odell home. And look, let's just forget that. Let's just forget that. Odell Beckham is no longer an impact player at the NFL level. He hasn't been that for a couple of years now. He is not a guy that's going to make a difference. And in my view, he's simply not a guy that's going to be worth the headlines and worth the attention and worth all of the distraction that's probably going to come along with bringing Odell Beckham back to the Giants. I don't see it as an answer, Tony. I don't know if you agree with me or disagree, but feel free to have your say on the idea of bringing Odell back to the Giants.
Yeah, I agree with that. If we could have the Odell Beckham Jr. pre-injury against the Chargers, by the way, in 2017, I guess, then I'd take it even with the circus that OBJ brings, right? But Odell Beckham isn't that receiver anymore. For my money, if they were going to bring in a wide receiver, I'd much rather have a guy who's 6'3", 6'4", who can, because when the Giants get into the red zone, I feel like they need to have somebody there that they can throw the ball to, who can go and get up and get a contested catch in the corner where things are tight. And they don't have that guy, I think, on their roster.
Well, they do have on their practice squad, and obviously, neither one of these players is a guy who's going to replace Malik Nabers. Neither one of these guys is a guy who's going to to go out and catch 8 or 10 passes a game, but they have 2 players on their practice squad. And I think it's going to be interesting to me to see if they bring one of these guys to the 53-man roster. They have little Jordan Humphrey, who's 6'4", 225 pounds, made several contested red zone type catches, the kinds of things that you're talking about, during training camp and during preseason. He's a limited guy. Okay. Does not play special teams, which is flabbergasting to me, for a guy who's made his living in the NFL as a backup wide receiver. But he's a guy who can make those short yardage type plays, who can be that sort of jump ball guy in the red zone that might give you that option to throw that fade, to the corner of the end zone. He's also a guy who could be maybe a guy that you put on the field when you're trying to run the ball. You put him on the field, and you get Wan'Dale Robinson off the field, and you replace a 5'8", 185-pound guy with a 6'4", 225 guy who might be able to seal a corner while you're trying to run the ball. The other option is Amir Smith-Marset. Now, look, the Giants chose Gunnar Olszewski as their returner over Smith-Marset. I'm still not sure why. Smith-Marset did a really good job last year. But what have we seen on kickoff return all season so far? We've seen the Giants put Olszewski back there, and they've used Wan'Dale Robinson. They've used Tyrone Tracy. They've used Devin Singletary. Yesterday, they used Tay Banks, who, by the way, had a nice return.
Yeah.
But what's happening? Teams are intentionally kicking the ball away from Gunnar Olszewski. Amir Smith-Marset may not help you that much as a wide receiver. But what Amir Smith-Marset can do is really help you on kickoff return because he's good at it, and you wouldn't have to be continually using your frontline guys, using a veteran running back like Devin Singletary, who probably shouldn't be back there anymore. You wouldn't be needing to use your frontline players to return kickoffs. So I'm anxious to see what they do. I don't know who else is out there on the market at this point, but I'm sure there will be a wide receiver workout for the Giants this week, or at least a workout that includes several wide receivers. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And, obviously I think they need something. I don't think they can go forward just with, say, Bo Collins, for example, as the guy that's on the 53 every Sunday. But for my money, if you can't find an explosive receiver, I see a comment bring in Jerry Jeudy. Well, I don't know, maybe after Jerry Jeudy went on a rant after yesterday's game for Cleveland, maybe Cleveland will be looking to unload him, But I have mixed feelings about Jerry Jeudy. He is an explosive receiver, and last year he seemed to finally be reaching his potential after a few years where he didn't. But he's not a free agent at the moment unless Cleveland decides to dump him. That you could just kind of bring in.
Right, we shall see. But they don't grow on trees. But I think Gabe Davis.
Gabe Davis is on.
Gabe Davis
right now, right?
is with the Bills now. So that's a guy that the Giants considered in the offseason. Davis decided to go back to the Bills. So it's not going to be easy. You're not going to find an impact wide receiver out there readily available unless something surprising happens. But we'll see. The Giants are going to have to make do with probably with what they have. So anyway, Tony, I think that's probably a good place for us to call it a day. Giants fans, thank you as always for the support. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.